Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking an unflinching look at the entertainment industry at Hollywood, which, according to this stack of investigative reports we have, is facing far more than just a temporary.
Yeah, it's much deeper than that.
We are talking about an accelerating structural crisis.
A crisis that sources are projecting will culminate in a financial and operational collapse right around 2026.
It's really an essential deep dive, I think, for anyone who cares where content comes from.
Or, frankly, for anyone who wants a case study in what happens when these huge entrenched industries just fail to adapt.
And we've synthesized information from several key places.
We have, most notably, a really sobering investigative report from the Wall Street Journal. And we've combined that with some of the sharp business and cultural analysis from places like Outkick, Deadline, and The Anchor.
So this isn't just studio gossip.
No, not at all. This is hard data. Yeah. And it's all pointing toward an existential threat.
And the central tragedy, I think, that we've identified across all these sources is the failure of the industry's great internal hope, this unspoken mantra that really dominated every conversation, from writers' rooms to, the catering truck.
That mantra was so simple and almost death when you think about it. It was just survive until 25.
Survive until 25.
Yeah, that was the rallying cry after the 2023 strike. It was this long-held belief that if they could just, weather the immediate economic fallout, the post-pandemic budget cuts,
right,
that 2025 would be the year of the great recovery.
The year the pipelines would refill, the green lights would start flashing again.
And the work would just come back to its previous predictable rhythm.
But the narrative we are seeing in this stack of reports is, it's the ultimate plot twist.
It really is.
The sources all confirm that 2025, rather than heralding this promised recovery, it not only failed to improve conditions for the vast majority of the workforce, but in fact, it saw all the financial and structural pressures just intensify dramatically.
It got worse.
It got worse.
So our mission today is really to understand the mechanisms of that failure. We need to dissect these multiple converging crises, the catastrophic job losses, the technological displacement from AI,
the immense cost of living and political friction that's causing this massive production exodus from California.
And of course, the looming threat of the streaming apocalypse that's being signaled by these massive mergers. We're dissecting how content will be made and by whom in the very, very near future.
And the stakes here are immense.
Oh, they are, particularly for that vast creative middle class who are, they're being squeezed out of existence.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's move immediately into the quantifiable proof of this collapse, the hard data.
Right, the job loss and the shrinking production volume.
We need to move past that sort of subjective feeling and look at the concrete, almost catastrophic statistics covered.
And this is where that Wall Street Journal piece really provides the context we need. When we talk about Hollywood struggling, it's often framed in terms of stock prices or failed tentpoles.
Sure.
But the real tangible sign of a crisis is the contraction of the labor force that supports the entire.
And that contraction is happening at an alarming pace.
It is.
So let's start with what you could call the post-strike reality check. We often look at the 2023 strikes as the beginning of the problem, but really they were more of a symptom.
It's a great way to put it.
Once those deals were finally signed with significant concessions to labor, there was this collective sigh and the expectation of immediate rehiring.
Everyone thought, okay, we're back.
So why didn't that happen?
Well, the initial logic was that the studios had simply pressed pause. They were dealing with the fallout from the WGA and SAG-AFTR strike and trying to reconcile years of overspending on streaming content.
The streaming wars.
Exactly. They needed to conserve cash, reset their balance sheets, and figure out which of the, dozens of streaming platforms were actually sustainable. But the fact that 2025 offered no significant bounce back shows the problem wasn't a pause button.
It was a permanent structural shift.
It was a permanent shift. Budgets weren't just delayed. They were fundamentally reevaluated under a new, ruthless cost efficiency mandate.
The projects just vanished.
Many projects simply vanished from the developments, gone.
And we can see the result of that reevaluation in the staggering numbers related to the job wipeout in Los Angeles County. This is the heart of the crisis.
It is.
At the end of 2022, the Bureau of Labor reported approximately 142,000 were employed directly in the movie.
And that number represents this dense concentration of specialized talent. It's the ecosystem that makes Hollywood Hollywood.
Right. It's the engine of global entertainment.
Historically, yes.
And by the end of 2024, the sources confirmed that number had plummeted to just 100,000 people.
Think about that magnitude. You just let that sink in for a second.
It's a loss of almost 1/3 of the entire creative and technical workforce.
42,000 jobs wiped out in just 24 months.
Wow.
This is not a gradual decline that allows people time to retrain or adjust. This is a sudden sudden, sharp contraction of the sector itself.
The sources describe it as a catastrophic decline.
And they're right to. To put that in perspective, I mean, the film industry has seen downturns before, of course, but the speed and the sheer scale of this reduction they're unparalleled in recent memory.
Which suggests it's permanent.
It suggests a permanent rather than temporary reduction in output volume.
And this brings us to a crucial distinction about who is losing work. When people hear Hollywood job loss, they might picture, agents or high-level executives.
Right.
But that 42,000 figure, it disproportionately impacts the creative middle class and, I think most tragically, the below-the-line workers.
Exactly. When we use that term, below the line, we are referring to every essential worker who is not a primary actor, director, or writer.
The artisans and technicians.
Yes, the best boys, the gaffers, the lighting grips, the sound mixers, the production designers,
Set builders, location scouts.
the specialized caterers, the transportation coordinators. These are highly skilled, often unionized tradespeople.
And their skills are incredibly specialized.
Very. You can't easily take a job as a dolly grip and just, pivot to being a software coder overnight. It doesn't work that way.
And the sources really stress that these workers, they operate on a project-to-project basis.
They do.
So if the production volume drops by a third, their income just vanishes.
It's gone. They are the absolute backbone of the entire operation, and their savings are designed to buffer maybe 2 or 3 months between jobs.
Not a year.
Not a year or more of continuous unemployment. The human cost of those 42,000 lost jobs is the destruction of an entire professional class.
And we also have to consider the secondary and tertiary economic effects on Los Angeles itself.
Oh, absolutely. This job wipeout cripples the entire support infrastructure. The dry cleaners who specialize in costume maintenance, the specialized equipment rental houses,
The local coffee shops and diners near the sound stages.
the logistics companies that manage these massive fleets of production vehicles. When 42,000 paychecks just disappear, the ripple effect on LA County's economy is profound.
So it's a crisis that radiates far beyond, Burbank and Hollywood Boulevard.
Much farther.
And this collapse is reflected in the physical environment, which leads us to the data on evaporating production and empty stages. The job numbers translate directly into a lack of activity.
Absolutely. The number of new projects starting it's the vital sign of the industry. And the reports show that roughly 30% fewer movies and TV shows with budgets of at least $40 million.
So major investment.
Major investment, the kind that sustained those 100,000 remaining jobs. They began shooting in the U.S. in 2024 compared to 2022.
A 30% drop.
That metric confirms studios are not funding replacement content to fill the void. They're just cutting.
And the most tangible evidence of this reduction is the state of the studio soundstage. I remember reading reports from the mid-2010s where just securing studio space was this massive production hurdle.
Right.
Occupancy rates were consistently in the 90s, often 95%. It was a seller's market for that kind of real estate.
Yeah, high occupancy is the smell of a healthy industry. It signifies constant demand and, utilization of capital.
But now,
the sources reveal a devastating drop. Occupancy has plummeted severely, down into the low 60s, and crucially, there was no forward-looking projection that suggests a reversal.
So these massive state-of-the-art facilities, they're just sitting empty.
Many of them are.
Yeah.
And they are incredibly expensive to maintain, especially in high-cost LA.
That plunge from 95% occupancy to the low 60s, that means a huge amount of sunk capital is now sitting idle. It's not generating revenue.
And that just accelerates the financial pressure on the studios, which forces them to become even more ruthless in cutting costs elsewhere.
Which usually means cutting labor.
Which almost always means cutting labor.
What I find fascinating and frankly terrifying is that profound drops in jobs, production volume, and soundstage, they're already happening before the major projected impact of the tech consolidation we're going to discuss.
The Netflix-Warner Brothers merger.
Exactly.
So we can't blame this entirely on the tech giants then?
It seems not.
Right. It proves that the industry was fundamentally broken, or at least, financially unsustainable in its current location and structure, long before the final technological hammer falls.
So the internal systems were already failing.
The internal systems of cost management, labor relations, geographic centralization, they were already failing under their own weight. The coming consolidation is merely going to exploit, rather than cause, this underlying structural weakness.
But that structural weakness brings us perfectly into Section 2, which looks at the external environment. It's impossible to talk about the financial crisis without addressing the massive political and economic pressures that are actively pushing productions and talent out of Los Angeles.
This is the California cost crisis.
It is.
And the sources are, They're unequivocal here. The environment in LA is increasingly cited as generally unfavorable for filming, but it goes beyond just traffic or weather.
Right.
It's a combination of political decisions and economic policy that have made operating in California financially punitive for productions and personally untenable for the middle-class workers who live there.
And we see the evidence of this in the demographic shift, which these reports highlighted as, frankly, stunning.
It's a huge deal.
For the first time in state history, California actually lost residents over the last 5 years.
Lost residents for the first time ever.
And the scale of that exodus is huge. The sources cite over 1 million people moving out in a single year during the height of the recent economic and political turbulence.
1 million residents leaving in a single year is a historical outlier. I mean, that signals a serious systemic problem that goes way beyond just high home prices.
It speaks to a deep dissatisfaction.
A deep dissatisfaction with the overall cost of living index, quality of life, and the regulatory environment.
And this is where we have to tread carefully and adhere strictly to our neutrality.
We do.
We are now relaying the specific arguments used by some of the source material, particularly the more politically outspoken analysis from outlets like Outkick, to explain the financial decision-making behind this exodus.
Yes, and it is absolutely crucial, Hugh, to understand that we are reporting on the claims made in the source material, not endorsing their political stand.
Exactly. The sources are attempting to link this mass outflow of residents and the escalating cost of living crisis directly to specific policy decisions.
Right.
The investigative reports attribute this mass outflow to several specific factors, which they claim worsen the cost and difficulty of operating in California. They cite Newsom's extreme COVID lockdowns, mask mandate, pseudoscientific COVID vaccine discrimination, and the left's insane energy rules, regulations, and sky-high tax.
So the argument being advanced by these sources is that these cumulative stressors, especially the high taxes and complex regulations, inflate every single aspect of doing business and living in LA.
They frame the high cost of living as untenable.
Because high taxes are applied to labor, high energy costs affect powering these massive sound stages and keeping production offices running. And the overall regulatory environment just makes project permitting slow.
And they don't just discuss economics. The sources also use some anecdotal evidence to reinforce their overall argument about the deteriorating quality of life.
They do.
They included a reference to San Francisco, describing it as a beautiful city that now has streets covered in shit, linking that visible decline to the political and social environment that they claim industry executives and workers are fleeing.
So if we look at this from a purely financial and capital movement stamp, the specific political flavor of the regulation almost doesn't matter.
Okay, so what matters?
What matters is the cost. If a state mandates high energy costs via aggressive regulation, that cost is passed directly to the production company.
Right.
If high local taxes force salaries to rise just so workers can afford rent, that increases the production budget. When these costs accumulate, as the sources claim they have, capital becomes incentivized to seek a cheaper, less regulated location.
And this mechanism drives the great production migration.
A migration that is not gradual, it's a rapid.
Characterized by incentive shopping.
Exactly, where productions are rapidly moving to other states and countries.
Destinations like Nevada, Florida, Georgia.
And various international locations are actively courting production by offering massive tax break and lower operational costs.
And California's traditional dominance, that rested on its infrastructure, its specialized labor.
It's institutional knowledge.
Right. But now that knowledge can be moved and that infrastructure can be rebuilt where it's cheaper.
Yeah, let's just clarify what incentive shopping truly means for you, the listener.
This isn't just a simple discount.
No. Other states, like Georgia, they often offer production companies significant tax credits or direct rebate.
And the mechanism there is critical.
It is. A tax credit might mean you subtract a percentage of your total qualified spending directly from your tax liability. A rebate is even more immediate. The state writes you a check for a percentage of your spending, usually on local labor, within their border.
And studios love rebates.
They vastly prefer rebates and transferable tax credit because they provide guaranteed cash flow and immediate budget relief. So when a state like California is perceived as slow, restrictive, and expensive, and a state like Georgia is offering a 30% transferable tax credit on local spend.
The financial decision for the studio executive is immediate.
And obvious.
And this is where the sources highlight what they see as a significant point of hypocrisy within the executive class itself.
It's a very sharp and pointed critique. The sources note that many left-wing studio executives who once supported Newsom and other far-left candidates have moved their production to other states or countries the moment their bottom line was threatened.
To the moment it affected them personally.
Yes. The irony is always hammered home. Redistributing wealth is great unless it's their own.
So what's important here is that the sources aren't just pointing out political inconsistencies.
No, they're arguing that this disconnect between executive politics and corporate financial behavior means that the industry leadership has essentially abandoned its own workforce to the high-cost state.
While they move production elsewhere.
Exactly.
And California's initial response to this financial drain was, according to the reports, characterized by arrogance.
It was. The sources note the state's political leadership was perceived as slow-moving and convinced of its own infallibility.
They just thought Hollywood wouldn't dare.
Right. And even when California finally responded by adding its own tax breaks to try and compete, the sources argue it just hasn't been nearly enough.
It can't counteract the fundamental cost of living crisis and the severe regulatory burden.
Which means it still makes more sense to film in Atlanta or Vancouver.
And this self-inflicted wound, the reports argue, is why there is a lack of national support for Hollywood's current crisis.
Yes. The argument presented is that the industry has so consistently shown its disdain or outright hatred for its home country and for segments of its audience,
that there's little national interest or political will to organize federal tax cuts or bailouts to save it.
So the conclusion, however harsh it sounds, is that by alienating the mainstream, the industry made its bed and has no choice but to lie in.
That public alienation feeds directly into the larger financial disaster of what they call political extremism and audience. For years, the industry's focus reportedly shifted away from crowd-pleasing films with broad appeal.
Right, and the sources argue that this strategic shift, often prioritizing narrow, ideological, or niche content over universal blockbusters. It meant that the industry's political extremism was finally coming back to bite them at the box office.
Film is a volume and scale business.
It is. You need massive audience buy-in to justify a $200 million budget. And if you actively alienate large demographic segments, the core American audience that used to guarantee profitability, you are shrinking your own market share by choice.
And there was a profound sense of hubris involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Most within the industry, shielded by the LA bubble, were reportedly happy to just continue pretending as though nothing was wrong or could ever go wrong.
They were operating under this historical assumption that Hollywood always bounces back,
that the global demand for content would always guarantee profitability,
regardless of content quality or cost.
And that complacency, combined with the escalating operational costs and the flight of production capital, it just created this fragile...
So once the technological disruption of streaming fully matured, there was no financial cushion left to absorb the shock.
They were exposed.
Exposed, isolated, and highly vulnerable to the coming merger war.
That brings us to the final, most existential threat, what some of these reports are calling the Netflix apocalypse.
This is the systemic risk posed by massive streaming giants consolidating power and effectively eliminating the traditional distribution models that sustained Hollywood for a century.
And we are specifically talking about the impact of the looming Netflix-Warner Brothers merger,
which the sources suggest is the tip.
The nervousness is palpable. Reports suggest that 2025 might be the last good year before the Netflix apocalypse happens. So why is this specific merger so dangerous, particularly for the theatrical business model? I mean, what is it about Netflix and Warner Brothers combining forces that fundamentally changes the rules?
It's two things: scale and control. Warner Brothers Discovery holds some of the most powerful tentpole IP in the world. Batman, Superman, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones.
Huge properties.
And Netflix has the most sophisticated global distribution network and just unparalleled data on subscriber behavior. So when you combine the world's most desired content with the world's most dominant streaming infrastructure,
they gain absolute leverage.
Absolute leverage over the exhibitors.
And that leverage is predicted to be used to crush the window.
Yeah. The primary threat is the death of the theatrical distribution.
The time a movie plays exclusively in theaters before it moves to...
Precise. And the prediction is aggressive. After a brief honeymoon period, maybe 2 or 3 years to integrate their libraries and optimize operations, Netflix is expected to aggressively push the entire industry toward a drastically reduced window.
Specifically citing
a 17-day theatrical run before the movie is immediately available on streaming.
17 days. That is barely 2 weekends. So I have to ask you, is that truly the death knell for the theatrical experience, or is it just another adaptation? I mean, didn't exhibitors fight back successfully a decade ago against shorter windows? What makes this different?
What's different now is the overwhelming volume of content and the saturation of the consumer market. In the past, the theater provided the only high-quality option. Now, the quality of home viewing is exceptional and the convenience is absolute.
So if a consumer knows that a film like, say, The Batman 2 will be streaming on their TV in just 17 days...
the sense of urgency, which is essential for mass ticket sales, it just vanishes completely.
It kills repeat viewings.
It kills secondary and tertiary viewing. And it significantly curtails word-of-mouth momentum, which used to power a film's success per month.
This immediately creates an enormous dilemma for exhibitors. They rely so heavily on those major tentpoles to drive volume, not just ticket sales, but massive concession purchases for weeks and weeks.
Yes. And the financials become inverted. Theaters have extremely high fixed costs, rent, utility, labor. They need that steady, long-tail revenue.
And if the window shrinks to 17 days?
The profitability of operating a large, expensive multiplex just evaporates. So the crucial question the sources raise is structural. Will exhibitors have the financial fortitude collectively to reject playing major titles like Matt Reeves' Batman 2?
Which is theoretically slated for late 2027.
Right. Will they reject playing it if Netflix WB demands this short window?
Logically, they should refuse.
Okay.
Right. It sets a terrible precedent.
In theory, yes. In reality, the sources suggest that financial desperation will force them to cave.
We've seen them do it before.
We have. Like when they agreed to play niche films like K-pop Demon Hunters, even after that movie had already been streaming on Netflix for a full month.
So if Batman 2 or Toy Story 5 are the only things guaranteed to fill seats on a given weekend,
they will accept the short window rather than risk having zero tentpole income. And the moment a single major chain accepts that 17-day standard, it becomes the de facto irreversible rule for the entire industry.
And we can already see this desperation reflected in the box office and the lack of tentpoles. The sources suggest the 2026 U.S. box office could hit $9 billion, which sounds reasonable.
But that projection is entirely contingent on that fragile theatrical window holding together.
Right. And when you analyze the actual upcoming slate, you see a picture of extreme risk aversion. There's no innovation.
No. And let's look closely at those specific titles the sources flagged as constituting the 2026 lineup. It screams reliance on existing IP.
Absolutely. It's almost entirely sequels, adaptations, and animated features that rely on existing audience loyalty. The list provided includes the Mario Galaxy movie, Devil's Prada 2, Animal Farm,
An adaptation.
The Mandalorian and Gru,
Disney IP extension.
Toy Story 5, Supergirl,
DC IP.
Minions 3, Moana live action, The Odyssey,
Classic literature adaptation.
Spider-Man, Brand New Day, Resident Evil, Practical Magic 2, Jumanji 3, and Violent Night.
The ratio of new original concepts versus proven bankable intellectual property is it's overwhelmingly skewed toward the familiar.
So when studios face financial pressure, they stop taking risks.
They stick to the characters and franchises that have guaranteed profitability in the past, even if the creative well is, running dry. The massive cost of failure means originality becomes a liability.
And they are even stacking their competitive releases aggressively, which suggests a profound uncertainty about the overall market size.
They are. We see several major titles like Moana live action, The Odyssey, and Spider-Man, all slated to hit in that crowded July.
That's an admission that the audience pool is shrinking.
It is. They feel they have to dominate a specific 2-week period, even if it cannibalizes their own market.
This dependency on nostalgia and sequels has made the re-release strategy a common and, troubling tactic.
It's very troubling. The industry is constantly pulling out old titles, Endgame, Labyrinth, various Lord of the Rings films, and putting them back on the big screen.
And the analogy drawn by the source material is perfect.
It is.
It's exactly what video game companies do when their new AAA titles aren't selling well.
They lean back on the reliably profitable catalog,
which suggests a profound exhaustion in the creative pipeline.
a failure to develop new properties that can consistently bring in massive, enthusiastic crowd. They're relying on the proven loyalty of fandoms that were established 2 decades ago.
And because the ticket revenue is constantly under threat from these short windows, the entire financial focus shifts.
Which leads us back to the often satirical observation about the popcorn bucket.
This is peak desperation, but it's also a powerful insight into theatrical margin economics.
It is. The reports note that theaters, desperate for cash flow, are resorting to selling massive, expensive novelty items, like the infamous $40 specialty popcorn buckets, just to survive.
And that $40 popcorn bucket is the symbol of the inverted business model?
It is. When you buy a ticket, the revenue is split between the theater and the studio, with the studio often taking 60% or more, especially in the first few weeks.
So the theater's margin on the ticket itself is razor thin.
Often only covering infrastructure and labor. But on a $40 novelty concession item, the theater keeps nearly 100% of the margin after the cost of goods.
So the profit driver has completely shifted from the artistic product, the film, to the ancillary merchandise.
Precisely. They are sacrificing long-term viability, which requires massive audience numbers driven by the movie itself, for immediate high-margin cash flow through concession. And when the primary method of profitability shifts from the film itself to the sugary drink, the entire artistic system is fundamentally inverted and ultimately unsustainable.
This brings us to the future. The model that the sources predict will emerge from this structural collapse. If the theaters do in fact collapse, a box office will collapse. The sources predict that the 2026 U.S. box office could hit $9 billion, which is very possible outcome, according to the way we watch movies and TV will change.
And that initiates the race to the bottom.
The race to the bottom.
Yeah. If that guaranteed high revenue stream from the traditional theatrical run is gone, the financial risk associated with massive budget cinema becomes untenable.
So studios will no longer greenlight $300 million movies.
No way. The focus shifts entirely to maximizing cost efficiency per hour of viewable content.
So what does this new business model look like?
It looks like aggressive cost-cutting, driven by streaming metric. Netflix is predicted to do stuff on the cheap, and the sources are clear that every other major player, Disney, Amazon, Apple, Comcast, will copy them immediately to stay competitive.
That is the definition of a race to the bottom.
It is, where profitability is achieved not by expanding revenue, but by dramatically shrinking cost.
Let's analyze that critical cost comparison. The source asks, why would a studio spend $300 million on a star
Which carries immense creative risk, huge labor costs, and a massive failure expectation.
when they can gain far more streaming mileage from $650 million productions?
And that term streaming mileage is key. A $300 million blockbuster needs to be a global, cross-cultural phenomenon just to break even. A $50 million streaming series, however, can generate hundreds of hours of watch time, reduce subscriber churn, and feed the platform's algorithm with a continuous flow of data.
So the goal of the new system isn't cult impact.
Not necessarily, or critical acclaim. It is maximizing minutes watched and reducing cancellation. A collection of reliable, cheaper content is a better metric for subscriber retention than a single, expensive, risky master.
And this emphasis on content made on the cheap has immediate, severe, and negative implications for the workforce and the quality standards we've gotten used to.
It changes everything about the production process. The sources outline that the new content will be made with significantly fewer people.
And here is a huge consequence of the failed negotiations and the California cost crisis.
This content will increasingly be made without union work, explicitly because they cost too much.
So the unions, by demanding more rigid terms and higher costs in this unstable environment, may have accelerated the very replacement.
It's a real possibility.
And there's a brutal prediction here about quality.
There is. The sources suggest that the drop in production values won't matter to most people as long as the content is functional and consumable.
So as long as there's something new to watch on Friday night,
The audience may tolerate lower production fidelity.
that is the core risk of the streaming model.
It is. The metric of success moves from the demanding spectacle, the thing you pay $20 to see in a cinema, to, well, background fodder. If the audience is satisfied with functional, cheaper, churned-out content, the pressure on studios to produce expensive, high-quality, time-consuming content just vanishes.
And it takes those specialized jobs.
Exactly.
This leads us to the accelerator of this shift. Technology and the new studios. Artificial intelligence is cited as a major replacement factor for certain jobs.
Like basic scripting, generating visual assets, even synthesizing voice act, further cutting labor costs.
But perhaps more fatal to the LA system is how technology eliminates the need for a physical, centralized location. The question the industry is asking now, do you really need to be in a massively expensive LA-based, union-controlled soundstage anymore?
And the technology, specifically advanced virtual production and green screen setup, has made it possible to replicate high-fidelity environment anywhere in the world.
As the sources put it, you can just throw somebody in front of a green screen and there's your new Netflix show.
Regardless of where the camera or the director is physically located.
And this advance completely bypasses the geographic necessity of the Hollywood.
It does. It means that people can start studios pretty much from anywhere, accessing global, cheaper talent and resources without having to deal with the operational cost, union obligations.
Or the high taxes and cultural constraints of Southern California.
This decentralization is the structural death blow to Hollywood as a physical, geographic entity.
And the culmination of all these converging failures, financial, political, and technological, it leads to a sweeping 2030 prediction.
Yeah, and it's a big one.
The sources project a wildly, wildly different Hollywood just 6 years from now. The core structure of Hollywood as we know it will no longer exist.
Instead, what we will likely have is a bunch of tech companies pumping out content. The sources specifically name data and distribution giants like Google as potential leaders in this new content landscape.
Which reflects the belief that the future of content generation belongs to those who control the algorithms, the pipe, and the data on consumer behavior.
Not the traditional creative gatekeepers in Culver City. The power has shifted from the artists and producers to the engineers and data scientists.
So if you are one of the remaining 100,000 people working in the industry, this is not just a warning. It's an immediate threat.
It is, and the sources offer very candid advice for the Hollywood workforce.
The blunt.
Very blunt, reinforcing this concept of a seismic shift. You know, we often take comfort in the stability of established institutions, believing that something has always been a certain way.
Yeah.
But this moment, the convergence of technological replacement, escalating costs, and political isolation is historically unique and profoundly disruptive. That comfort, the belief that it will all return to normal, is the greatest obstacle to survival.
And the candid advice offered is mercilessly practical.
Do something else.
Have a back.
The skills learned in the industry are incredibly valuable. Logistics, project management, specialized creative and technical expertise, but they need to be applied elsewhere.
Outside of this rapidly imploding structure.
It is a profound wake-up call designed to shake people out of their complacency. The suggestion that it's not too late to become a plumber or an electrician is used to highlight the fact that consistent, profitable trades secure in local markets
Might offer exponentially more long-term security than relying on an industry that is simultaneously self-absorbed and structurally collapsing under the weight of its own operation.
The stubborn refusal to adapt, combined with monstrous costs, union demands, and the rise of decentralized technology, has just created an utterly untenable situation by 2026.
This deep dive has offered a necessary and sobering look behind the curtain of the entertainment industry. Let's quickly consolidate the key takeaways for you.
First, this crisis is not temporary. It is a structural collapse, and it's evidenced by that catastrophic loss of nearly a third of the LA workforce and the subsequent talent and business exodus from California, driven by punitive costs and regulation, as argued by these reports.
Second, the traditional profit engine, the theatrical run, is on borrowed time. The impending major tech mergers are poised to eliminate the window, pushing the industry into 17-day releases that exhibitors will likely accept out of raw financial desperation, setting a new devastating.
And finally, the future of content is lean, cheap, and decentralized. The entire industry is rapidly moving toward generating low-cost, non-union content driven by streaming metrics, with technological giants positioned to bypass the traditional geographical and labor constraints of Hollywood entirely.
So what did this all mean for you, the general audience, even if you are not a film insider?
Well, this is a powerful, real-time case study in the consequences of complacency and rigidity. It shows how quickly entrenched, seemingly invincible industries can be completely disrupted when internal friction, like the political polarization and high costs cited in these reports, combines with rapid, cost-saving technological innovation and a failure to listen to the shifting demands of the broad consumer base.
It's a textbook example of the high cost of assuming business will just continue.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, and it raises a final provocative thought for you to chew on as you survey that 2026 movie slate.
Okay.
If the primary focus of Hollywood's new masters is purely maximizing streaming efficiency, that race to the bottom, and their fallback strategy is increasingly just re-releasing nostalgic hits from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s.
What happens to truly monumental, risky, big-budget original?
The kind of expensive, boundary-pushing narrative that required massive capital and the guaranteed months-long theatrical run to justify the budget.
Will that kind of ambitious, culture-defining storytelling simply cease to exist when Google, Amazon, and cheap content farms become the studio system? That is the question sources leave hanging.
A question worth considering every time you hit play.
We'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.